Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, our fourth Angling Trust Virtual Sea Angling Forum of 2022. This evening, I'm very pleased to welcome Erin McEwen and Ronald Sojourner from the Ulster Wildlife Trust. I think many people will know me. I'm Stuart, Head of Campaigns at the Angling Trust. And working with me in the background tonight is Nevin Hunter, who's driving all the technical aspects of this evening. Nevin is our marine coordinator, and our policy and campaign manager, Hannah Rudd, who will be monitoring and moderating the questions this evening. So before I hand over to Erin and Ronald, I'll just run through quickly how the evening's going to work. We're all sitting here this evening on the Microsoft Teams webinar feature for this event. This should help us to be more interactive through the presentation and enable us to ask questions and possibly even take part in some discussions. The way that will work is that you should all have an icon on your Teams which has the word chat written underneath it. If you click that, you can type in a question as Erin or Ronald give their presentation. And when they've finished, Hannah will work through the questions that have been added into the chat. It would help us if you tried to keep your questions as concise as you can. But as inevitably, and it will be a good idea if a debate starts, then a debate starts, and we will keep an eye on that too. Once we've exhausted the questions, there would also be an opportunity to ask questions in person. You can do that by pressing the button called Reactions on your screen and raising your hand. That gives us two advantages. The first is it tells us who wants to ask a question, but it also gives us the order in which the hands were raised so we can make sure we come to the questions in the right order. So if you could use those two functions, that would be brilliant. When we finished from hearing from Erin and from Ronald, and we've gone through the questions, I'll just come back onto the screen to close the evening off for us all. And finally, before we hand over, I'd just like to remind everybody that this session is recorded. We do that so that we can publish it on our Angling Trust website after the meeting. And we actually do find that we get a lot of views to that, and it almost doubles or even triples the audience we eventually have who view these seminars. So it's a really positive way of spreading the message. But if you don't want to be part of the recording, then either when you ask a question, if you do ask a question, you don't have to switch your video on, and then you won't appear, well, your voice may appear, but you won't appear in the recording. So I think that's enough for me for the introduction. And as I said, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Erin and to Ronald, and I think it's Erin who's going to kick off the presentation this evening. So Erin, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Stuart. I'll just share my screen here. And hopefully my presentation will pop up, but if there's any issues or any problems, please shout out and let me know. I can't see anybody anymore.
All good.
Perfect, good stuff. So yes, firstly, thanks so much for having Sea Deep and Ulster Wildlife here this evening. We're really excited to chat with you all. My name's Erin, and I am the Sea Deep Project Officer at Ulster Wildlife. And if you haven't heard of Sea Deep before, that is based Shark and Skate Conservation Project. So a large portion of the work that we do at Sea Deep involves monitoring our local shark and skate species. So what we have here in Northern Irish waters, where they are around our coasts, and if there's any hotspots or critical habitats these species are using. But from a conservation perspective, we are limited in both our access and resources when using the seas, and also just the know-how, how to navigate our seas and how to monitor and fish for these species. So for that reason, we work really closely with a group of incredible, dedicated volunteer anglers and the Northern Ireland angling community in general. And that helps us increase our data and our understanding of these species. So this evening, I'm going to just chat through our work and hopefully highlight what is possible when the fishing community and conservation researchers work side by side. And as Stuart mentioned, we also have Ronald here, who's one of our most dedicated anglers. And once I've finished chatting, he's going to share some experiences as well. So quickly this evening, I'm going to chat about our local species in Northern Ireland and what we kind of focus in on, a bit of context for what we're catching and tagging. And if you're familiar with any of these species, or if you have experience handling any of these species, we'd love to know. So yeah, please put it in the chat and we can discuss that afterwards. I'll also touch on the current status and how these populations of shark species are doing in Northern Irish waters. And then onto our angling community, the tagging training that we provide and what that entails, and just our sea deep community in general. And then some of the project achievements and what we've been able to find out by working alongside anglers here in Northern Ireland. So first off, where are we based, or where does Sea Deep operate? Well, we're based in Northern Ireland. We work predominantly with anglers out of Belfast Lough. So if you're familiar with Northern Ireland at all, working out of Belfast Lough and then kind of up the east coast of Northern Ireland, but we also work with anglers along the north coast in marinas like Ballycastle, some work in Portrush as well. So trying to get a really wide reach right across the coastline. Locally, we have some really incredible shark and skate species here. We have about 20 resident species, but on average around 40 sharks, skates and rays have been recorded in Northern Irish waters. So there's a lot of species of interest. The first one that I want to highlight is one that you've maybe seen a bit about recently, is the poor beagle. So this would be the largest carnivorous shark species that we would get in our water. And if you've caught one or interacted with one of these species, again, please let us know. These guys can get quite big. They have been recorded to get, up to 3 meters. And recently there was one actually tagged in the last few weeks off the coast of Donegal, which I believe is over 2 meters, which is incredible. And a lot of the ones that we've tagged for the project are, kind of 1.5 meters, around that size. From our work, we know they're mainly found off Malin Head, which is the northwest corner of Ireland, around that Donegal region. As a species, they're believed to be highly migratory. I know there was a study where one individual was tagged off the west coast of Ireland, and 7 years later, that same individual was recaptured off the coast of Canada. So they're making those massive migrations. But we also now are starting to think that there might be some specifically females using that area around Malin Head, or showing a bit of site fidelity to that site and coming back there time and time again. So there's some research ongoing at the moment, which will hopefully uncover a little bit more on that. They are a livelier species, so they're not the easiest to handle. So that's where kind of training on best practice catch and release really comes into play to help mitigate stress or harm when tagging these species as well. We also have a real keen interest in spur dog or spiny dogfish. So a smaller shark species than the poor beagle. Maybe most of ours tagged are kind of around the meter in length. And we've tagged spur dog right around the Northern Irish coastline, so we know they're distributed quite well. And they tend to travel in large shoals, especially the females. They are one of my favorite species and truly fascinating species. They have what's believed to be the longest gestation period of any vertebrate. So it's believed they can carry their young or be pregnant for up to 2 years, which is really, really incredible. But unfortunately, they are susceptible to bycatch quite a lot because they do travel in massive groups and they can get caught up in these large fishing nets. So that's why it's really important for us to know as much as possible about these species and monitor them a little bit more. We're also catching a lot of different skate species. So this includes thornback, which you can see pictured here, but also spotted rays, occasionally blonde rays as well. Obviously, these guys differ from shark species. They live predominantly on the seabed, have that different shape. The thornback, for example, is distributed again quite widely around our coast, but our tagging data has shown that we do kind of have areas along the north coast which show aggregations of females together at certain times of year. So that is kind of giving us an insight into how these species are using the coast, and if there are potentially important sites, for example, nursery grounds, that we would want to monitor more, so we can, if that is the case, advocate for a little bit more protection at these sites. But tagging, when it comes to any of our skate species, throws up a lot of questions. So, for example, we have a lot of spotted ray egg cases that will wash up on our coasts, but we're not catching a lot of spotted rays out at sea. So that's why the monitoring, or the continuation of monitoring, is so important, to learn a little bit more about these elusive species. Another species that I'm sure you're all well familiar with is the dogfish, or small spotted cat shark. So maybe not the most popular of species, can sometimes maybe be a bit more of a hindrance for anglers, that you just pull them up with every line. But this is our most common shark species. In Northern Irish waters, they're found pretty much throughout our entire coastal waters. We catch them a lot, but we're still asking our anglers to report them and to tag them. Not everyone they catch, because they do catch a good few, but just enough to help us start to build an idea of presence and abundance around our coasts. So, for example, we used to have a lot of this species in Strangford Lough, which is a really important area for biodiversity in Northern Ireland. However, they were historically overfished and numbers plummeted, and a survey carried out by Sea Deep in 2018 showed that this species was no longer existent in the loch, or didn't use the loch. So it does show, even for our most common species, there's areas of local depletion. So we really want to start to kind of build an idea of their presence, so we can be monitoring them to avoid any further declines. And we've got a good photo here. This was actually taken by Ronald, who's going to be chatting a bit later, which kind of shows two of our local shark species, the dogfish and the bullhuss. And it's just a good idea of comparison of size. So we get quite a few bullhuss as well tagged by the project too. One of the final species that I want to touch on is a real favourite for us at Sea Deep, and this is the flapper skate, or also sometimes known as the common skate. So this is the world's largest skate species. They have been recorded to reach lengths of 3 meters from, their tip to the end of their tail. However, we record them on an average, well, we can get up to 2 meters in length, in between 1 meter and 2 meters. They've been known to live to about 100 years of age, and we are really lucky here in Northern Ireland to get these off our coast. For the most part, like other skate species, they live on the seafloor, so you don't see them a lot, and hence why within general, coastal communities or the public in Northern Ireland, this species isn't really talked about as much as we would love it to be. At Sea Deep, we really love to shout about them. We always kind of think of it as everybody loves the manta ray, which is maybe their more charismatic relative, but the flapper skate is really our own manta ray, and it deserves a lot more love and attention. Unfortunately, as a species, they are listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, meaning if we have any further declines, it could lead to us losing this species in our waters permanently. And also, it's important to note, in our waters in Northern Ireland, the flapper skate is protected under the Wildlife Order, which means you need a permit and a licence from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs here to want to catch this species or target it in any way as well. So it is protected. Just another image of them on the seabed. I did have a video, but it wasn't working very well. It was quite jumpy, which I wanted to use to show the size of them, but they really are incredible. They are massive. And I believe in Scotland, I found out recently that they actually refer to them, the anglers working there call them barn doors sometimes, just because of the size of them. If they are tagging them, the kind of scale is massive. But what is the problem then? So why are the flapper skate and so many of the local species in Northern Irish waters declining? and why is it important for us to want to monitor them and kind of halt this downward trajectory? Well, sharks and skates have been historically overfished in Northern Ireland waters. So I've got two photos here. I think these are from the early 1970s, and these were actually taken in Strangford Lough, where we used to have several species of flapper skate and other shark species were present. We actually found brochures that were, I think from the 1960s, and they advertised Strangford Lough right throughout Europe as kind of one of the top places to come to fish for these species, particularly the flapper skate, which of course, given the size, it's such an impressive species, people wanted to come and they wanted to be able to catch it. So people would flock from all over Europe. Unfortunately, it was too much pressure at one time, and the practice of that time is very different from today, where catch and release is practice. For the flapper skate, it was more catch and kill. So that really just made this species crash, and they haven't really recovered in numbers like they were historically. There would also have been targeted fisheries for species. However, when populations became so low, a lot of these fisheries were no longer viable. And in fact, the flapper skate was the first elasmobranch species in the world to be declared unviable to be fished commercially, as numbers just got so low, and unfortunately they remain that way today. So it's important to ask, why have they not bounced back? You know, the flapper skate now is a protected species and they're not being commercially fished. You know, they're being released if caught. So with a lot of our sharks and skates, why is there not kind of been this population bounce back? But it's important to note that for sharks, skates and rays, they're all really slow growing species. So it takes them a long time to firstly reach maturity. The spur dog's quite a good example of this again. I think it takes them until they're about 14 until they're ready to reproduce. Then a lot of the species, including the spur dog, have those long pregnancies. So for example, if you're a spur dog, it's 14 years till you can have young, and then it's a further 2 years until you can introduce those young into the populations again. And so that's a long time to go without, you know, being threatened or kind of having a high mortality on the species in our oceans. They also have small litters, so unlike maybe more bony fish that will spawn quite a lot of eggs at one time, some of these species will only have, you know, 3 or 4 pups at once. And then considerate of them, they'll have resting years, so there's no guarantee that once they are mature, they will reproduce and have young every year from that point on. So all those characteristics in combination with, you know, how historically they've been overfished and the threats these species face now in our seas has meant that they've really plummeted and are struggling to kind of bounce back in any way. A lot of these species also use more coastal areas as inshore nursery grounds for their young. And again, in the past, that worked well because these areas were more sheltered and they were shallow sites. So it gave, you know, protection for either egg cases or for young in their most vulnerable early years. But unfortunately now, with our coasts becoming so busy, you know, you've got a lot more activity, tourism, pollution, infrastructure in these sites. So they're maybe not as safe as they were historically, or we're losing them altogether. And finally, some sharks have what we call site fidelity. So basically they have home sites that they'll return to or they'll frequent quite a lot. So while some species, like for example, the porbeagle we touched on earlier, will migrate really long distances, some will actually stay resident in one area. Now, this can be of benefit from a conservation standpoint because if you know where they are, it's really useful. You can sometimes put protection measures in place. But if you don't, and say there's habitat destruction or someone wants to target that species, or there's pollution, that can be a real threat to a really large number of the population at once. So it's kind of a combination of all these elements that makes these species, we think, some of the most vulnerable in our seas. And yeah, this has resulted in a lot of vulnerable species here in Ireland. So right across Irish waters, there's about 71 species, 58 of which have been assessed. And the majority of them fall from near threatened down to critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. And that's something we want to halt, those declines. So why should we be worried? Why do we want healthy shark and skate populations? Well, and I'm sure many of you will know this, but sharks play a really important role in keeping our oceans healthy. So most marine food webs, you've got your sharks, your skates will sit at the top, and they're those apex predators, and they have a disproportionate effect relative to their abundance on marine food webs. So there may be fewer sharks at the top, but if we alter that number in any way, this will have almost a domino effect on the rest of our marine food webs. So for example, if we get rid of all our sharks, we'll see kind of that massive increase in maybe smaller, bonier fish species, and as they're no longer being preyed upon, and then this large number will then overconsume further down the food chain. So that base of the food web, your phytoplankton, your zooplankton, depleting the amount available. And this base, that plankton, is really, virtually the base of all marine food webs in our oceans, and also plays a massive part in producing the oxygen that we breathe. So they're pretty important, and we don't want them to become depleted in any way. So we really want to keep healthy shark populations so these food webs stay in balance. But it's also important because we rely on healthy marine food webs for food and for jobs and for recreation as well, for angling, particularly around the coast. So we want to keep them nice and healthy that way. So that's enough of the sadder tale of the state of our sharks. What are we doing to take action about this? So we've kind of touched on the current situation, that we have declining species, but we want to work to conserve them now, and this is vital. And to do so, we need to know, firstly, what species we have, where they are around our coasts, but why they're using our waters as well, what our waters offer to them. And this is where, in Northern Ireland, Sea Deep project has come into play. So the project was established in 2018 with the aim to learn more about local species so we could conserve them effectively. Now, prior to the project, we didn't have a lot of kind of concrete evidence or data on our local shark and skate species. A lot of it was predominantly anecdotal from anglers as well, who were kind of just telling us what species they used to catch more, or where they'd noted areas of decline, or if any species had actually increased. So we needed to start to build, some proper data from this. And from a conservation perspective, we just didn't have the resources, the skill set, or the knowledge to go out to sea, monitor these species, and then achieve the kind of project goals that we wanted to. So this is where we started to work with and gained so much support from the NI angling community, and where their work comes into play. So we have worked alongside volunteer anglers. We work to train them up in best practice tagging training. So this training covers catch techniques, so the best way to catch, the best equipment to be using, how to then tag species correctly, so where to tag, how to handle species when you're moving them into the boat and off the boat, and then also right down to release. But our training also covers shark biology, our local species, and the importance of shark conservation. So really going into why we need healthy shark populations. And through that, we've been able to build a really incredible conservation-focused angling community here in Northern Ireland, which is really incredible, with a lot of anglers with a lot of passion to want to go out and work to tag these species. We carry out sessions throughout the year, both at sea and at land, but we always like to get out to sea with our anglers to get them, trained up in actually tagging species, and get that experience. And we do deliver group training, but we've also done more one-on-one training as well. We're pretty flexible that way. Then we also provide equipment, which is completely free. And it's important to note that our training is also completely free that way too. And then we are able to direct any of our anglers who we've trained up to our website, which you can see at the bottom there. where they can then record their submissions and their data and just easily transfer that to us, so we're able to get a hold of it. So some of the resources that we've been able to provide, you should be able to see here. We've got a best practice poster, and you can get this on our website if you want to have a look. But this is available for all our anglers. It's basically just a summary of all our training, so you don't have to remember it all. We've also distributed these posters to a lot of our local harbour authorities just to raise general awareness, direct other sea users towards Sea Deep too, but just let anybody who is kind of catching these species and isn't part of the project have an idea of how to handle them to kind of mitigate any harm to the species in general. Within our kits then, we have some other resources. So we have a minimum and maximum species size tagging sheets. So just reminders of what tools to use when you're tagging certain species, and also when a species is too small that you should avoid tagging and just release them back into the water. We also then have recording sheets with a lot of details, so we can get as much information from when the guys are out at sea as possible. And then tagging guns and tags as well. And each one of our tags, we're using T-bar tags mainly. They'll have Sea Deep's information and a unique ID number on them as well. So if we get any recaptures, we're able to look back at our data and get an idea of where this species is moving around our coasts. So what have we been able to achieve? Well, we currently have about 80 local anglers trained up through the Sea Deep project. And we've tagged about 639 species so far, so a really incredible effort. The most being tagged by one angler is 124 species. I don't want to embarrass him, but that is Ronald, so he'll be chatting in a moment. So he's got a lot of experience tagging for us. And then in terms of some of our priority species, so the flapper skate, what we've been able to find out about it. So currently we have 112 flapper skate tagged, majority of those being along, again, outside Belfast Lough, up the east coast of Northern Ireland, and then along the north coast as well. We do have a very small recapture rate for our flapper skate, but it is early days, and a lot of projects like this, you know, you need to be tagging a lot more and having a lot more people out tagging to start to increase the likelihood of that recapture rate as well. So hopefully, you know, the more this project continues, the more we'll be able to find out. And we have 13 anglers who are licensed to tag the flapper skate. So as I said before, if you want to target flapper skate at all in Northern Irish waters, you have to be tagged, or you have to be permitted to do so. You have to have a license. It's a criminal offence not to have a license. And to acquire this license, you have to have taken part in the Sea Deep training. So anybody who's gone through the trainings, built a real appreciation for these species, knows what needs to be done in terms of handling them, to handle them in the best way, and then they're able to get a license and go out and kind of increase that information for us. So we have had some really nice finds as well so far. So as I mentioned, we have had a few recaptures, although it's been small. We did have a really nice one recently where a skate, flapper skate, that was tagged just pre-Sea Deep. We kind of did a pilot study. It was tagged off the east coast of Northern Ireland and was recaptured about 5 years later in Scotland, which we know is a really important site for this species. And so that gave us a good indication that there is mobility and movement between these two areas, and also that the tagging best practice that was being put in place was working well, because the species was still really healthy and had grown a little bit since it was last tagged too. We've also had some juveniles as well. So we've got juvenile spur dog. We've had a juvenile flapper skate too. So this just throws up more questions for us. You know, could this mean that RCs are really important for this species when they're at a vulnerable life stage? And if so, we want to learn more to protect them and help these kind of depleted populations recover locally. In terms of our other exciting work, the project has now trained our first tagging champions. So the Sea Deep project itself is actually coming to an end in its current form at the end of June. But we wanted to ensure that the angling community that's got that conservation mindset could continue to grow, and those able to go out and tag could continue to grow. So we trained up our most dedicated volunteer anglers to deliver our tagging training themselves. So they are now equipped to do so, and they can continue to go out to harbours and marina, train other interested anglers up and sustain that work post-project as well, which is really, really great. We also work closely alongside the Belfast Loch Angling and Conservation Club. So this is the first angling club in Northern Ireland to have kind of a conservation-based work as its focus. And the club was founded by CDEEP volunteers, so Michael Gaw, and all new members who join are really encouraged to take the training on. So it really just shows, and again, I'm going to emphasize just how grateful we are for kind of the enthusiasm from the angling community here and all the support. And we're really gaining some incredible insights that just wouldn't be possible without them and the work they do, which is amazing. Other than that, we do just also have some educational training resources that we've been using at CDEEP. So this is our 3D life-size flapper skate. It's called TAG. And we've used TAG in our training with the anglers as well, just to allow them to get an appreciation of scale and size and to show how to handle this species and where to tag them, so they're using best practice. But also we bring TAG out to public events just to help raise species awareness in general, and kind of, yeah, enlighten people to that we have this incredible species here locally and we want to do everything we can do to conserve it. So before I pass you on to Ronald, just to say a little bit, I just want to say thank you so much for listening again. Our website's up there, CDEEP NI, so please feel free to have a look through that. We've got loads of resources and more information on the tagging training. You can also see our email address is on the website and is below there. So any other questions, if you don't get a chance to bring them up this evening, please get in touch. We'd love to hear them and kind of continue this conversation because it's really interesting work. And we also have at the bottom just our, we're on social media, we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter. So you can follow the project there just to kind of keep an idea of the work we've been doing and where the project's going from here on in, because as I said, we're kind of coming to an end of the current stage and we're hoping to adapt and evolve the project a little bit more. I will stop sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody's still there and everybody can still hear me. And I think if Ronald is about,
yeah, no, I've managed to get my IT problem sorted because my laptop crashed earlier, so I had to reset and get another one on the go. So hopefully you can hear me now.
Fear.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ronald, if you're happy enough, I mean, you have, you know, the experience of 40 years angling and now the conservation experience of working at Ulster Wildlife. So I'm sure if you're happy enough just to kind of talk a little bit about.
Yeah, no, just nearly as much the importance of actually tagging, getting the training, because even I'm guilty of it myself, mishandling fish years ago. You're holding fish up to the tail or spur dog, you're holding them wrong, sharks, you weren't really supporting them properly. And the training really helped bring that out. Also being able to recognise signs of stress in the fish. There's a bit of red tinge coming around the edge of the fins. Now when we're tagging, if we start seeing any flush of colour at all in the skate or the spur dog or anything, we're just straight back into the water. Don't even worry about tagging around, just put it back. Just get back into the water, don't even lift it out sometimes. But it's handy being able to, as an angler, being able to talk to other anglers about the tagging program, because a lot of people are scared of giving away their data. I know Aaron's very, whenever we're doing the tagging training, we're making sure people are aware that I don't know their marks. I don't see any of the data. I'll pass everything over there, and that's the last I know of anything. Because everybody's always scared. Fishing's the same everywhere. Everybody's scared of giving away their marks. So that's one of the things I'm always, whenever I'm getting people on board, it's just like, I don't know any of your data. I don't know where any of the fish are caught.
Yeah, I think that's important to note as well, is we have a contract drawn up with any anglers who we train up, and the only people who have the data or who have it available to them, specifically the coordinates, which obviously people want to keep their coordinates and their fishing marks to themselves, is myself at CD, and then Dira, who's our department, who would be, if they wanted to, you know, kind of really analyze the movement of the species around the coast, and they're looking to talk, you know, about areas for protection. They just have access to that data. But yes, other than that, no one else does.
Yeah, it's just good as well being able to work with the department who do the licensing. You know, we're now working towards best practice guidelines, you know, where we can sort of tell them realistically what we're doing, you know, how we're fishing for them. So whenever they start bringing out different rules, you can get a wee bit of accommodation. Just even for photographing the fish, as long as we're photographing, not posing for a photo, as long as we photograph the fish when we're working with it, putting it on a mat, put the tag in or something like that, but you're not looking up, smiling at the cameras. That's just part of the license agreement now. We all know what it is. And it's just being able to work with them with wee things you got. Where before they were just like no photographs, where now they're starting to soften a wee bit, where you can actually at least, you know, get a photograph of your fish, which everybody wants to get at some stage.
Yeah, I think when the license was drawn up initially for targeting flapper skate, you know, it was very, very strict, but it didn't really come from the perspective of actually being out at sea and being an angler and the realities of, you know, tagging these species. I think initially there had always been the idea that you wanted to tag the species in the water or from the side of the boat. But as you know, Ronald will have experienced, that is both dangerous for the species and for yourselves if you're out angling. So it's important, you know, to bring it on board. And then following kind of best practice from Scotland, which is really before Sea Deep, there was the Scottish shark tagging program in Scotland. And that really led a lot of our work, or inspired a lot of the work that we do, the training that way. They've had a lot of success there. The first ever marine protected area for flapper skate has been designated in Scotland in Loch Sonart and the Sound of Jura. So we know we have species, you know, that are distributed right across the region. So it made sense for us to follow suit in what they were doing. But yes, I think as the project's gone on, the department have really trusted the anglers a lot more, and trusted Ronald's judgment, or any of the champions that we've now trained up to deliver the training. They, you know, want to know firsthand the realities of what it's like to tag these species, and then from that, we'll kind of adjust any licensing accordingly. That isn't, you know, that's something that will maybe be worked on further down the project, but yeah, I think it's been great to see kind of government working alongside us, and conservation working alongside recreational anglers as well that way, which is really, really fantastic. Do you have any favorite memories at all, Ronald, with the project?
Probably just the recapture, getting that one skate. I've caught it same skate 3 times now. I caught it twice in the one day. I caught it in the morning tide, and later on in the afternoon the tide changed, coming back down. I caught it again later on, 5 hours later. The same fish, and then 6 months down the line I caught it again, all within about half a mile of where I caught it the first time. Now that's considering we're fishing in close to 400 feet of water and out in the open North Channel. It's pretty impressive to see the same fish popping up. Obviously likes the bait and likes the tactics. That's not doing too much harm. So
I think that demonstrates as well that the release techniques and the handling has been done well, because on each recapture, or the training's being really put into effect, the species was healthy and brought up well, and didn't show, you know, any signs of stress upon release again, which is great to see that that's working well.
Just something we quick look through some of the questions here.
Yeah, if we could perhaps, if Hannah's able to moderate them for you, she could then pick those up with you, if that's okay. Save you having to look.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Erin and Ronald, for a fascinating presentation. It's really useful to hear, and it sounds like a very exciting project. So we've had quite a few questions come through. So since we're on the topic of flapper skate, I'll ask Tim's question first. And he's asked, am I right in thinking you're suggesting we inboard big skate rather than tag them in the water? If so, can you clarify the signs of out of water stress in a big skate so we can pass this advice on to anglers? I've always discouraged inboarding and won't publish photos of boarded skate, but if you think it's a better practice, then that's great news. And very good presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
you
no,
want to take that, Ronald? You go ahead.
Yeah, certainly from an angler's point of view, we tend to basically overgun. We're using heavier rods, probably what we need to, but it's getting the fish to the boat quickly, as quick as we can. And when you get them, you're basically, whenever you're set up on board for the fish to come in, we can have it landed, measured, tagged, and back into the water within about a minute and a half. Because we have it, you don't get these things in quickly. You don't get into the boat quickly, so you can have the boat set up where you've got your measure mat down on the deck, you've got your release net over the top of the measure mat, and you've got your tagging gun sitting there. So as soon as the fish hits the deck of the boat, tags in, it's on the measure mat already. You get a quick measure of it, lift the net back into the water. It can be done really quickly. And if you see any sort of red flush around the edges of the fin, or the sort of even like a reddish tinge, just put them straight back in. If don't even land them, if they do look flushed at all, there's like a reddish sort of glow to them around the edges of the fin. And as soon as you start seeing that, return the fish, or don't even land it. Just unhook it at the side of the boat with a T-bar. T-bars are brilliant because you can just get the hold of the hook, turn it, and pop it out straight away. And we're barbless most of the time now as well, so the hooks come out really easily.
Yeah.
So to clarify, sorry, Erin, to cut across you, but just to clarify that only really inboarding for those scientific reasons that you've mentioned. Otherwise, you wouldn't advocate for bringing the fish on board for, say, a photo opportunity.
No, it's always
just wanted to clarify
unless you're
that.
tagging them or even taking DNA samples or anything out. It's just unhook it side of the boat.
No, that's good to clarify as well. In Northern Ireland, it'll be different in different regions, but as I mentioned, you need the license to even catch skate to be targeting them. But with that license, it can't be used for recreational purposes. It has to be as part of research, so as part of the research that we're doing, or as part of research that DERA is given the go-ahead to. So yeah, it really would only be for those scientific research purposes. Another reason that kind of having them fully out of the water is maybe going to have a bit of more of a benefit further down the line is quite a lot of research is looking at how each skate, the spot patterns along their back is unique to individuals. Now it's still early days, but we think that could potentially be a way to also ID them or identify any recaptures, and that would even, you know, if this is a way that's found to work, reduce the likelihood of even needing to tag, which can slow down the time spent out of the water even that little bit more further. So as Ronald said, yeah, it's a very, very quick process, but only ever boarding them for scientific reasons that way too.
Perfect, thank you. And we've had a similar question in on poor beagles and larger blues. So what would your advice be for that? Both, obviously, I mean, sometimes there are rare situations where you need to do that. So I don't know if you want to give some more colour on what those might be and how best to decide there and then what is in the best interest of the welfare of the fish.
Generally, anything over about 1.5 meters, and poor beagles or blues, just tag them at the side of the boat. They're not worth the trouble of landing them because the thrash about, they damage themselves, they damage the rods, they end up with broken eyes and all sorts of situations. We were always fishing small boats. We're only sort of 17 to 21 feet boats. There's not an awful lot of room anyway. If you get a full size skate in, sort of 2.2 meters long, 2 meters wide, there's not a lot of deck space there. Poor beagles don't give you an awful lot of room for leeway for in around the deck of the boat. They just tend to latch onto things, whether it's your seat box or your toes or waterproofs. One pair of waterproofs destroyed by a taupe. It left me 2 cracking half moon marks out of the thigh of the waterproofs. It sort of tagged me in the way in. So no, generally blues and poor beagles we don't even. But small ones, sort of 60 or 70 pound, that you can lift out of the water this easily, quickly tag them back in again. But anything bigger, just tag them alongside the boat. They're not worth the trouble. It's too much hassle, too much damage.
You find, Ronald, because of the shape of, you know, the poor beagle of the blue compared to the flatter shape of the flapper skate, it's easier to tag them.
Yeah, poor beagles especially are a bit of a handful. We've had them sort of close to 8 feet long, so I don't know what that is in meters, like, but you can't even get your hands around the rest of the tail to control the thing in the water. So it's quickly throw a tag in and pop the hook out the side of the boat. I've nearly got my knuckles broke just trying to hold on to the tail, hold on to the rest of the tail, and they're battering me off the side of the boat in the water. So it's just like, nah, leave them in.
Great, thank you. Good advice. They're powerful fish, aren't they?
Poor beagles especially, yeah. They're always lively.
Yeah. So in terms of your best practice tag and release training, you gave us a wonderful overview of that and what's involved there. We've had a question in asking how is it made available, and how can you be a kind of a beneficiary of this training?
Yeah, so the training, unfortunately, outside of Northern Ireland, it's difficult to deliver it. But it could be something that, depending on the next stage of the project, we could look at doing, you know, more detailed online courses. Part of the training does involve, you know, an actual aspect of tagging and us kind of seeing someone tag a species. So that's the part that really means that the best way to deliver it is in person. But you can, as I said, get our best practice poster, which is on our website, and I'll send the links around to those so they can be sent out. Now, that doesn't mean that you've, you know, partaken in CDEEP training or that you are, you know, a CDEEP volunteer in that way. But it provides a lot of information on, you know, if you are catching these species, or if you incidentally catch these species, how to handle them when you have them, the best way to release them, just to kind of mitigate any harm to the species and to yourself as an angler. But if you are in Northern Ireland, you know, for the remainder of this year, while we will be doing tagging training, we do have some courses organised for May, but they're something that we're always eager to get sorted, and we can plan them quite easily. So the best way would be to just email CDEEP or email myself as well, and we can talk about numbers, location, and the best way, and then we can try to accommodate training that way too. So a few different options, but always worth, if you think you'll be able to make it to training or avail of the training, to get in touch and we can try to organise something.
Perfect, thank you. And Adrian's asked, how do you recruit suitable taggers around the coast? So is it a case of anyone applies and then they can go through the training, or do you vet people once they've applied?
Yeah, so I think when the project started, we tried to advertise at marinas or do it on social media, but we found the best way was really word of mouth. So we were quite lucky because Ronald is obviously an angler with a lot of experience and knows a lot of people in the community, but he also works at Ulster Wildlife. So he was kind of our in, and he helped facilitate a lot of the early conversations that got or encouraged people, persuaded people to want to take part in the training to start off. And since that, because people have found the training so useful, we've kind of just been able to steamroll it that way. At the moment, I tend to just reach out to marinas or harbours and put a word out that way. We don't do any vetting or anything. Absolutely anybody who's interested can come along and take part in the training. The way the training's designed is really to ensure that you leave not just knowing, you know, this is how you tag in the best way, but also with like a real appreciation for the species and the importance of wanting to tag for them, and how valuable someone within, you know, the angling community can be in helping us that way. So we've been really, really lucky. We've just kind of kept going from there and built a really incredible community of people who will always get in touch if, you know, they've seen anything interesting or feel like they can chat to us or have any questions with us that way. So yeah, Northern Ireland's not too big, which is kind of good for us as well. So everybody tends to know everybody as well. So yeah, we've just been able to put out communication through harbours that way. And the training sessions always seem to get a lot of interest, so it helps us build them.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. Thanks, Erin. And so once anglers are part of this program, they've gone through the training and they're out there collecting data. We've had one question in terms of how do you deal with GDPR issues relating to data ownership and access to it, portability of recreationally collected data. I know you mentioned previously in terms of who owns it from an Ulster wildlife perspective, but what rights do anglers have, I suppose, in terms of accessing that data?
Yeah, so in terms of GDPR or access to data, everything is completely confidential. We will store all data within Ulster Wildlife System. It's password encrypted. I'm the only person who can actually access it in that way. So no one else is able to get any access to that. Of course, the individual angler can always access or get access to their, past coordinates that they've submitted through us, simply by communicating with us that way. It's all online for the most part, so we're able just to take it from our online submission form directly, but occasionally people will, fill in registration forms at each training, and we just shred those immediately after we've inputted the data into our computer system that way. And similar with coordinates of actual locations, so nobody has access to them. For example, I mentioned Ronald works at Ulster Wildlife, but he cannot get access to them in any way, shape or form. There's no priority there. It would just be myself in the CD project, and the only other people who can see coordinates are DAERA, so our department, but they don't have access to angler details or phone numbers or communication or anything that way. That would just be ourselves. Another thing we have that I forgot to mention was a newsletter as well. So one of the things that anglers can do when they do sign up with us is leave an email address with us. It's an option. They don't have to sign up to a newsletter, but it's also been quite a nice way to communicate and build the community and keep people informed. That seems to work well too.
Perfect, thank you. So staying on the topic of data, a lot of the species that we've spoken about move quite a fair amount. So cross-boundary collaboration is important. So we've had a question from Miguel who says many species are known to shift between Northern Ireland and Scotland. Very important that this angling data is collected on a UK basis. What are your plans for that? Are you talking with other people from other countries, or is this something more on the horizon?
Yes, yeah, we completely agree and are very aware of that, and are hopefully now with the next phase of the project trying to grow our communications that way. We've been in contact quite a bit with Nature Scott recently about putting our data down together, analysing movements. We've got quite a few other projects ongoing in Northern Ireland. There's Sea Monitor as well, which are they're tagging skate and working alongside Scotland and us, just to try to build that more of a picture of how these species are moving around our waters. And from that, we are seeing a lot of connections between like Loch Foyle in the north coast all the way up into the Inner Hebrides and Outer Hebrides. So we know that's there. We're also working a lot with groups in the south of Ireland as well, in the Republic. So there's a few different projects ongoing down there, Marine Dimensions, there's Ray Project. So we've been doing a lot of networking, and we're hoping to kind of, now it's very early days, we'll need to get our planning hats on to get it sorted, but to kind of bring together a all island, shark research networking event of some sort, in person, because we haven't been able to do anything like that in a few years, just so everybody's on the same page, everybody's working together, and everybody knows what everyone can bring to the table. And we've also just been trying to do that with the wider UK as well, through events like this too, where we're trying to raise our profile, and working alongside you guys has been really incredible and really helpful in that way. And knowing that if we really want to make any conservation impactful for these species. It's going to have to take into account the fact that they move quite a lot, and any legislation or protection in Northern Irish waters, it's going to need to be reflected in wider UK and Irish waters to make sure it's really going to be beneficial. So definitely that's a priority for us at the moment, to do that sort of work.
Great stuff. And yeah, we're certainly starting conversations between ourselves and the Shark Hub, which the Angling Trust are a member of, and seeing if we've got any collaborations. So yeah, definitely an exciting time. I'm conscious of time, so we've probably got about 5 minutes left for questions. I've just had one more through in terms of data, so whilst we're on that topic, it's worth mentioning it. So John says coordinate data is protected, but does the same apply to the number of captured species in, for example, an ICES area or for time series data?
So can you repeat the question again?
No, not a problem. So you mentioned that coordinate data is protected, but does the same apply to, for example, the number of captured species, or such as in an ICES area or time series data? So I suppose is all the data protected, or is it just certain elements of it?
Yes, so the coordinates are protected. We're producing, in terms of making anything publicly available, we do hope to produce more like abundance maps for species. So in our agreement with anglers, we've agreed to share any data that's shared. It will be shared to about 10 kilometers distance. So people can see publicly with the end of project report where we've had species tagged, or where we know they're distributed around our coast, or where we're getting particular areas of abundance. So we should be able to display in that way number of species captured. It's just that coordinate, those exact fishing marks, will remain anonymous to that level of detail. And hopefully that answers that question.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, John, if you need any more clarity, feel free to drop us a message in the box. I appear to have messed up timings, and actually we're due to close at 8:30 if you've both got the time. So I'll crack on with the questions.
Lots more coffee.
So still on the subject of data and building this trust between the conservation and science community with the recreational angling community, how have you found that as a challenge, and what have you done to kind of build the bridge between both communities that historically there's been some burning of those bridges, shall we say? So what challenges have you had, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, maybe I can say something quickly first, Ronald, and then you can talk from your experience.
Yeah.
I find it really positive, just personally. I've been working with Sea Deep now for just over a year. So I suppose in a way I'm quite lucky. I've come in when a lot of the work's been done to build those connections so far. But I've found, yeah, for the most part, when we reach out to a certain community or a town where we know there's you know, a really strong fishing presence, or there's anglers there, for the most part there's an eagerness to at least communicate with us and chat and sit around the table and see what we're about, and we totally appreciate that, even just, you know, yeah, making those connections in the first place. So yeah, and any of the training we've done, you know, if I've delivered a training session in, say, Ballycastle, and I haven't met any of the anglers who are there before, this is their first time getting introduced to any of our work, the response afterwards has always been really positive, and just a lot of questions and a lot of eagerness. I think there's a real appreciation that if you want to keep, you know, we could almost have so many more species to tag in local waters if our populations are doing really well and are maintained or even increased within recreational angling, and then we'll also get that benefit of just our oceans being healthier in general from having healthy shark populations. So it's really seen as a win-win. I think from us as Sea Deep, it's just really important that we constantly convey the transparency of what we're doing the work for, the kind of just gratitude for how helpful it is to be able to work with anglers, and how we really could not be out at sea collecting. You know, the amount of tags we've got so far, even for smaller research projects, that's a real challenge. And because we've got people out there working all year round, or anytime they just go out for a trip, they might get some data for us. That's really, really helpful. So I've had a great experience working alongside the angling community thus far. And again, if anybody has any queries or qualms, or you know, just wants to ask any questions regarding any of the work, I think we appreciate the need to, like, listen and constantly learn from that, and move forward that way. So it's been good from that angle. Ronald, I don't know if you have any other experiences.
No, certainly from the angler's point of view, I think it's good to have the like of Ulster Wildlife, you know, collating the data, because anglers are lazy. If they can just tag stuff and hand somebody else the information, especially Ulster Wildlife, then they can deal with data and the powers that be for, because there is Belfast Dock used to be full of spur dog, thornback rays and stuff like that, and that was commercially fished out 20, 25, 30 years ago now, and the fish just still aren't back. And the anglers are now having to move out sort of further offshore, where used to be you could fish in around the shoreline. A great point. It's only fishing 30, 40 feet of water. You've been getting thornback rays and spur dog. They're not there now. You have to go out in the boat and head sort of 2 miles offshore before you start getting any spurs. So if we can get that data collected to show, look, and even anecdotal, to say, look, we used to be able to get these fish here, and now they're gone purely because of commercial overfishing. To try and get some sort of protection in around the loch, or sort of strengthen the protection. So we have Ulster Wildlife on board. It's a feather in the anglers' caps as well. Ulster Wildlife are trusting us enough to train us up, get the data, get it all collected. And we do. Anglers are out putting a lot of hours in, and okay, they're not always tagging. Like, I don't tag every time I'm fishing. Generally, I tag most fish, but some days you're getting a mini spur dog, you give up tagging. No, it's just you can't tag all the fish, but you make a note of that. You just say, you know, we'll only tag 10 fish out of 50. That sort of way, because you hit a shoal spur dog, it can go a bit mad, and you just don't have time. You don't enjoy your fishing then because you're too busy trying to get tags in. But as long as you make a note of that, or even getting the juvenile spurs, you know, sometimes they're hanging on to the skate bait. These things are only a foot long. You're fishing with a 3-pound coldfish for bait, and the baby spurs hanging on to it. Wee bobbers won't let go, or the biting. You get the wee tiny wee sort of like a wee half moon shape where they bite a chunk out of your bait, and you go, oh, baby spurs are about. But again, you make a note of things like that. Baby taupe as well, wee juveniles. So it just helps you get a bit more information about what's actually happening on the ground, that probably the fisheries officers wouldn't pick up, because they wouldn't see the like of that, nets and things. So anglers are probably the best feet on the ground for gathering information for that sort of thing. But it does help Ulster Wildlife. They're happy enough to take all our information and run with it. It benefits both of us.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you've both said there. And to just kind of 2 questions off of that. Firstly, are you working through this project with the commercial sector at all? And secondly, when you've collated your findings, and I don't know what stage you're at with developing that into reports, for example, but you've fed back to government and suggested, you know, our anglers are seeing this, we think X, Y, and Z needs to be implemented. Are you finding that they're receptive to that, or is it you know, what's the outcome really?
Yeah, so firstly, in terms of working with commercial fishermen, we had tried to go down that route as well, but I think at the time when we'd approached it, and understandably so, you know, when they're out catching fish, they're really focused on work, and every second is, you know, having to just make that profit and catch fish that way. And they didn't really have the time to put aside to then also be tagging species and taking that time out of their working hours almost. So we'd maybe thought, you know, that could be something to approach again if, you know, there was other funding from another project that would then maybe fund in a different way to allow that to happen. We have been training a lot more now, kind of skippers of certain vessels, working with some groups in Northern Ireland who would maybe go out and more recreationally again, fish for species, but if they're trained up themselves, if anybody's catching a species, they'll be able to step in, even if those individuals aren't trained with sea deep, or they are visiting, or if they're coming from further ashore to fish in our waters, the skipper will be trained up and they'll know how to tag the species and then kind of relay the information of what they're doing and why, just kind of spreading that conservation element within angling again. The second part, in terms of kind of government cooperation that way, we found for the most part it's been really good that way, and it's been responsive, and it's kind of helped us narrow down areas now that we want to focus on a little bit more. So we'll chat quite a lot as a project with the department here. We'll communicate all our work, show them, of course, our data. They're working with a few people at the moment to analyse our data as well a little bit more. And they really have, they've kind of stated specifically for the flapper skate, that's a real priority species. It's on the Northern Ireland Wildlife Order. It's on the Northern Ireland priority species list. That if the evidence is there, they kind of have an obligation to protect that species. So they're very much wanting to see our data. And from working alongside the anglers, there have been some areas, again, along the north coast and the east coast, where we're finding there's an abundance of flapper skate, or, every time those sites are visited, flapper skate are caught. And DAERA are certainly aware of those areas, and they're encouraging, further monitoring there. Looking at the next stages of this project, they definitely don't want to see, like we don't want to see, just all this data be sat there and nothing to come of it. I think they want to continue to grow the data and work that way. I think it's also a priority for all of us at Sea Deep, DAERA, and within the angling community to kind of find new spots to target as well. Of course, a lot of our anglers will go to similar areas that they know well to fish, and we're catching loads of certain species in those sites. But we do kind of have evidence gaps dotted around our coast as well. So I think DAERA, hopefully, again, it all depends on funding with these sorts of projects, but depending what comes down the pipeline, they would really want to encourage, a further scale, wider scale across the country. So they'll maybe support kind of boat trips or costs that way, to increase our data and see what else there is. So no, it's definitely going well, and it's going in the right direction. And I think we're all kind of on the same page. We're just wanting to make sure any spatial protection that's put in place is going to be correct and impactful and in the right area. And it just takes that little bit more data, I think, at the moment, to know that it's going to work that way. So yeah, we're getting there.
Great, thank you. That's good news to hear, at least. So again, last couple of questions, but we do have time if any members of the audience want to submit anything further. So turning to Kev Woodcott's question, with the Tope Fest taking place in June in Luce Bay in Scotland, do you ask the organisers for stats over the dates? Do you work with recreational anglers through competitions and participation events as well? I'm just going to add that little bit on the end there.
Yeah, we haven't really. The Tope Fest in Scotland, it hasn't been something that we've looked into, but now that you've mentioned it, it'll definitely maybe be something we'll be interested to see what the findings are. Tope's an interesting species. Maybe Ronald can chat more, but from my knowledge, Carlingford Loch, which is kind of a region just on the border with the south, it is really renowned for having a lot of tope, and kind of think there's anecdotal evidence that there's a tope nursery ground in that area too.
Yeah, it's one of the big sort of main popping areas for the big female tope. Sort of 60-70 pound tope every year come out of there. But if you're fishing with small hooks, these smaller baits are white and things, you'd be tortured by all these baby tope. That'd be sort of 8 inches to a foot long, just massacring your bait.
I think
it used to be traditionally they had a tope festival down there as well, but in years gone by they literally just piled the tope up in skips at the end of the day. They're all brought ashore to wade, so all those fish are all dead, and that's all sort of breeding females. Again, it comes back a bit like the porbeagles moving in short this time of year. No, they needed a wee bit of protection back then, but in those days, nobody thought about it. It was just like, oh, brilliant, we have loads of taupe down here. And they just kept everything they caught, and then they literally were just skipped. They were lying in piles on the quayside. Hopefully now more people are starting to become aware of it. So it should be more better handling, releasing the fish at the side, especially the big females, just release them at the side of the boat. No, don't even bring them in.
And do you think, again, this is, sorry, just a question, I'm hijacking the question session. Do you think education around things like how long these species live, how long they take to reach sexual maturity, how few pups they produce, do you think that is helpful in generating behavioural change? Because, I mean, from personal experience, when you speak to members of the public, not many of them realise how long it takes some of these species to reproduce for the first time. And it's kind of take a step back moment. So I was just wondering whether in your experience you've encountered similar kind of experiences with anglers.
I think so, certainly. When we deliver the training, we kind of always talk about those slow life history characteristics that make your shark skates and rays different, you know. And I think, yeah, people don't realize quite how long for some of the species, especially species that they're maybe coming across quite a lot in our waters, quite how long it can take for them to, become mature and to reproduce. So I think it does help, because when you've got that acknowledgement, you understand, okay, for everyone I take out then, you know, that's going to take a long time for that individual to be replaced in any way, shape or form. So there's definitely more of an awareness to want to release these species back in, but also in a way that's going to cause them the least stress, you know, and just kind of avoid mortality completely. We do, you know, other educational bits and pieces at Sea Deep. We kind of will do school sessions and such like that as well. And I think it's the same is applied, but it's kind of lovely sharing that information with angling community more so, because they work, you know, day to day with these species. So just that kind of acknowledgement almost makes the species you're, you know, monitoring just more amazing, more impressive, you know, in that way. I don't know what you think about that, Ronald, or if you think when people find out that element.
Yeah, certainly when people find out how long it takes to, like, a spur dog to mature, the bit more appreciation of actually handling them properly. They'll have a bit more care over them. Not just throwing them back into the water, even with dogfish and stuff like that. You'll still see guys just throw them over the gunnels and won't even pay attention, dropping the fish into the water, just literally dogfish throw it over the side. I think maybe we should be handling that a bit better. Yes, it's a doggy, but it's a small shark. Now, they might be abundant at the minute, but 20 years down the line, if you keep doing that, they might not be. So you have to look after all of them now. The smaller rays as well, just how to handle them properly. And seeing this, even the small rays, whenever they start getting stressed, they flush as well. So whenever you start seeing that, you put them back straight away, even though they're only wee tiny boys, sort of 7 or 8 pound weight. You just set them back into the water, let them recover properly, and let send them on. But no, definitely the training's very good from that point of view, where you're finding out more about the fish and you have more appreciation of what you're catching. Then learn a bit more about them.
Interesting. Perfect. Thank you. So moving back to Sea Deep and kind of data sharing, I suppose, between anglers and Ulster Wildlife Trust. John's asked whether there's a copy of an agreement that the anglers sign and whether it's available publicly on the Sea Deep website. Is that something you'd be willing to share with him to take a look, or I'm not sure how confidential that information is for you guys?
No, we do have copies. So at every training session, once the session's done, and if the anglers are happy with what they've learned and they want to take that next step and get the free equipment and kind of become part of our community, there is a registration form, and that will have all the all that element is entailed in that form, you know, kind of codes of conduct and GDPR and data handling, data sharing, what we'll do with your data, any questions are in that. I don't think it's public, but it's a blank form, so I can certainly send a copy onwards to anyone who's interested, even maybe to yourselves, and you can share that wider, just so you can see, yeah, the kind of stuff that we're asking. But that would really be once that's signed. And then we do kind of have like a 3-strike rule. Now, thankfully, we've never ever had to use it. But it's more, you know, if someone maybe who is trained up as an angler has not followed best practice at one point, you know, the first step will be that we just get in touch just to make sure, you know, because it can easily be done, or a mistake or something can be forgotten about. So just to recover training again. And then a second time, you know, more in-depth training. Then if it's a third, unfortunately, that would mean, you know, that you would maybe not be a volunteer with us anymore, and we'd need to take back the kit that way. But thankfully, that's all covered in our training, and we've never had that situation. But I can certainly send that out. Yeah, so you can have a look at it.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, but I'll make sure that John, you get a copy, and anyone else in the audience that's interested, we can circulate that. So Daniel Carroll has sent in a question, but also suggested, has also said that he catches all of the species that you've mentioned. So if you ever need any assistance, he's more than happy to help you guys out. But his question is, do you think it would be a good idea to have a UK-wide project at some time in the future?
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, any sort of project that encompasses a wider region that has everybody working together is only going to increase our knowledge of how these species are behaving in our waters. And with that information, yeah, let us know what we can do to protect them. Because as we know, you know, they don't respect borders that way. They move right throughout our waters. So yeah, that it's kind of crucial going forward. I think that everybody's collabing more, and one of the best ways to do that would kind of, yeah, have a project where everybody's got the same aims, same objectives. It's just organizing that, and yeah, kind of getting the resources and the means to do it. But I certainly feel we would love that, and I can imagine anybody else in shark conservation right across the UK would be eager to do something similar. So yeah, fingers crossed down the line. For the time being, there'll definitely be more collaboration, but it'd be great to get a project going at some point. It'd be great.
So even just to see records of the actual movements of fish now, because until 4 years ago, we never got smooth hounds in around Belfast Loch, and they started sort of 4 years ago, disappeared out of nowhere, and it must have been like a warm plume of water come up, because the same year they started getting gilt-head bream up along the few more on the east coast there that you never really got before. So if you're tagging the like a smooth hound is suddenly appearing out of nowhere and keep on doing that, you can sort of see the movements of species that are maybe moving around sort of north or east or west or whatever, the ones that you don't normally get. So it's good to have those on record.
Yeah, and going forward, I know like the ungulate ray isn't really a species we would get in Northern Irish waters, but more for slightly warmer waters off the coast of South of Ireland, south of England. But studies have kind of shown that there are individuals moving further northwards. So that might be a species that we start to see in the future. It's kind of like a climate indicator species where it's moving, if its habitat or the conditions that it likes are increasing that way. So yes, as Ronald said, to kind of have an idea of that data and that understanding now is going to make it easier to monitor in the future, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Anglers are going to be central to that, recording those observations as our changing ocean with, you know, the climate induced shifts, predator prey dynamics changing. Very kind of exciting but nervous time because obviously not changes we want to see, but equally seeing the species that are moving around and what they're doing is certainly interesting from a scientific perspective. So I think we've gone through all of the questions, but Nevin's got his hand up, so I'm sure he's got a burning question as well. But just before I hand over to Nevin, I know you've responded to this in the chat, Ronald, but just before we do hand over, I think for everyone else, in case they've missed it, it might be worth just discussing it quickly. And John asked, has anyone been prosecuted for targeting flapper skate outside of the scientific permit and not being licensed to do so?
Yes, you maybe mentioned that, Ronald.
It could be a touchy one.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there's only been one in recent years, and unfortunately, yeah, that person did not have a license. So it was DAERA. DAERA is really going to be monitoring that side of things more so than us. But I think they were prosecuted in that way. I suppose that's why we want to try as much as possible to increase the stretch of our training to make people more aware that you do need a license to target flapper skate in Northern Irish waters, and it protects both the species but also yourself from getting prosecuted in any way, shape or form. And the more people that are aware through the training of that, the more will either maybe be able to get a license themselves to then actually contribute to wider research that way. Or if they're not going to be able to get a license, we'll just know to avoid bringing a flapper skate on board their boat. Because it's definitely something we would advise against doing.
Perfect, thank you, Erin. Thanks, Ronald, too. I'm going to hand over to Nevin. Yep, off you.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, look, my it's a question really, and it's a follow-on from some of the chat stuff that John's particularly raised around the issues of licensing. And I understand probably why he's asking the issues about the flapper skate, because the potential threat across England and Wales is that Paul Beagle could be added to Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. If they're added to Schedule 5, which obviously you've got in the Northern Ireland order as well, effectively that you've got Schedule 5 species. I mean, not necessarily obviously Paul Beagle, but certainly the flapper skate. So the issue for us then is potentially under Section 16 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act across England and Wales, and in Scotland as well, there's a need to apply for licenses for scientific research purposes. My question really is, how has that worked in Northern Ireland then, in terms of how you do you as Ulster Wildlife apply for those licenses to and effectively sort of monitor that on behalf of DAERA? I'm certainly aware within England that it's each individual case basis that licenses are applied for. So that could have an implication for us potentially down the line with some of our species. So I'd be interested just to know how that works out. And am I right in saying that your wildlife order, where you've got the flapper skate, is the equivalent of the Wildlife and Countryside Act that covers England, Scotland and Wales, and the schedules are similar, although the species may be different? Am I right in thinking that? And you have a Section 18 license as opposed to a Section 16 license that we have over here?
I believe so. I can double check. There's no real differences. More so just to check what the Wildlife and Countryside Act entails in full. But I'm thinking they're very similar in that way.
So you apply for the licenses then, do you? Is that how it works? Yeah.
So for flapper skate specifically, it'd be the only species that I would really work with, that I would need to work with people to apply for licenses. To apply for a license to target flapper skate, you need to have done the CDEEP training. So you take part in the training with us, and then at the end we usually ask people, is anybody interested in applying for the license to target flapper skate? One of the benefits maybe in Northern Ireland is it's quite small, and the angling community is quite small. So anybody who does, and maybe Ronald can say on this, but he would maybe know anybody who does want to catch flapper skate or has experience catching flapper skate, because you do need a little bit of experience to go out and then target them. They're not an easy species to be handling or bringing on board. You want to have that experience anyway. Then we will send them the link, which is on the DAERA website, for where you apply for the license. We kind of offer any help in that way. One of the elements of our license is that you have to have some sort of experience targeting flapper skate, which, as you can imagine, can be quite difficult because you need a license to target flapper skate. But yeah, we try to make sure that, for example, Ronald and some of our other anglers are really, really experienced in it and been doing it for a long time. So they're maybe communicating with individuals who would want to apply for a license. But after that, it's all completely at DAERA's discretion. Someone will put in for a license. We'll have said that they've done the training with us, But after that point, it'll be up to DAERA whether someone's permitted a license at that stage. But yeah, I tend to find for us, you know, because it is a small community, a lot of anglers who I've been out with and talking to personally, you know, they're not interested in the flapper skate because it is a difficult species to go out and target. But of course, that's not going to apply for you guys when it comes to species that you've been targeting for so long now. But I wonder, is there anything you want to add on that, Ronald, at all? Or
yeah, well, sometimes even the plan for license, you can nearly use, you know, if people have been out fishing with us in the boats, you know, because generally a small boat, you'd have 2 or 3 anglers out in the one boat. So if you're somebody new to it, you can take them out a couple of times, get them a bit of experience actually built up on what's involved with the traces you're using, the setups, the gear you're using, and how you actually handle the fish, getting them into the boat. So they might not actually be fishing for them, you know, or else we can hand them the rod the odd time and say, this is what the fight's like, and you put the harness on them, the butt pad and stuff, and get them strapped in. Sometimes it's not for people. They come out and they try it once and they go, no, we don't like using 4-pound lead, anchoring in 400 feet of water. It's not for the faint-hearted. Sort of, we have fairly strong tides around here as well, so it's a fairly specialised way of fishing for them, even from the boats, from the setup. So it's a fairly small group of people wanting to do it. And generally, you can take them out for a day or two, and then they can use us as a reference with DAERA to say, we have been out with these guys, we've fished with, we've seen what to do, as well as and that's on top of the tagging training then as well. And you're not going to give somebody a reference if they're an absolute idiot, to put it bluntly. You're not going to stand with them because you don't want to chance losing your license because you've been a referee for somebody who is starting to do stuff wrong or doing something way off the game, what they're meant to be at.
Sort of linked to that, and I hope I'm not hogging this, but the issue of then DAERA then, but as you say, relatively small community, you must have built a good level of trust with them for them to actually understand how the project works and what you're trying to do, and why the licensing is important for what you're trying to do. And sort of linked to that, can I just flag John has actually just typed a question, as he was the one who raised the issues earlier about the licenses. Do DAERA have access to the data? I presume he's meaning the the data that's gathered presumably from the licensing from your data as well.
Yeah, so DAERA will have they have anybody who's got a license, they'll have their details, so contact details, because it's more DAERA's license than ours in that way. So they'll have those records, and then DAERA, yes, are the only body that we will share the exact coordinates with. But that's all covered in training. So if you get to the training and you're not comfortable with that, we totally understand. Then being a volunteer isn't for you in that way. But yes, DAERA would kind of be that department that we work closest with in that way.
I know at the start, DAERA used to ask for us to report it yearly on our catch for the year. Now Aaron actually pretty much, we've give Aaron our permission to pass on our information. It saves us having to do it, rather than sort of come to the start of the year, they're asking for, right, what did you catch last year? How many trips were you out? What fish did you tag? And all the rest. So Aaron has all that information ready, so she can pass that on. It saves us having to sit for half an hour trying to work out all your catch records for the year. To pass on to them.
Yeah. We've been planning for quite a while, and unfortunately the weather's been really unforgiving this winter and we haven't been able to, but DAERA are really interested to get out on the boat with us as well and kind of see the tagging firsthand, because I think, there's an appreciation that what's done and written on a license maybe isn't actually going to be really realistic when you're out on a boat and you're actually tagging these species. So we really appreciate that they want to come out on the boat, mingle more with the anglers themselves, learn from them and adjust maybe the license accordingly, or make sure everybody's supported as possible. So yeah, they've been really supportive of the work, and I know that might not apply across the board with different groups, but fingers crossed going forward, with yourselves, that communication and transparency we found really important, and it needs to be there.
Well, so if you're inviting them out in the boat, ask them, you can say to them, look, come on out with us anytime you want. You've nothing to hide, and they're more than happy. Then they're thinking, well, they're keen to bring us out. you know, we're inviting them. We're calling ahead, and there's no problem. Come out and see what we do. So we have nothing to hide. We're doing everything that we best practice that we can for the fish, and when we're tagging them and stuff, and they're more than happy with it.
Okay, that's great. Normally Hannah would finish and hand back to Stuart now, but I don't think there's any other questions that have come in. So Hannah, if you're happy, I will hand over to Stuart. Thanks. I'll say it from my point of view. Thanks for a great evening, and I'm sure everybody's enjoyed it. So Stuart, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nevin, and I agree. A fantastic evening, really fascinating. So thank you very much, Erin and Ronald, and thanks for everybody who posed questions and all the really interesting discussion. As I've said, we've been recording this session this evening, so we will be placing that on the C pages of our Angling Trust website. So any of you want to go back and review it or recommend your mates and things to have a look, it would be really good. We'll also be sending everybody who's attended this evening a feedback form, which Nevin will send out in the next couple of days. That's again to just get some feedback on how you felt the evening went, what improvements you'd like to see if you want to see any, but importantly as well for you to suggest maybe other topics that you might like to discuss on these virtual sea angling forums, because you know these are your forums, so it is always good to hear other topics you'd like us to arrange and to discuss on them. And finally, just to let you know that we have another forum coming up on the Thursday, the 19th of May. Won't be quite as big as Sharks this time. It's actually with the National Mullet Club. So we'll be hearing all about mullet and the National Mullet Club on the 19th of May, which I think will be a really interesting, evening as well. And a request that if you don't get our Sea Angling newsletter, do please sign up. You can do that via our website, and there we'll keep you informed of all of the things we're doing around sea angling, and also future forums that are coming up. So finally, I'd just like to thank Erin and Ronald for a really, really interesting evening. Thank you both very much. I hope we haven't taken up too much of your evening, and to thank everybody for attending, and hope to see you all again soon. So thank you and bye-bye.
Bye guys, thank you.